非常的强劲，CrowdStrike 接近11 ，PNW 呢，我会继续去追踪最新的美联储动向。今天是 Walsh 的演讲，演讲的话还有15分钟不到就开始了，是在10点美东的。今天是第一天啊，所以在标题里面呢也给大家去打好了。So he'll be in the House first， 在这一个众议院，然后明天是 Senate， 在那个参议院这一边呢有听证会的。明天的会议有可能是短一点的，因为其实也没有短多少，短的话也应该有2个多小时的，正常的话是三个多小时左右。House 里面有多一点的这一个众议院里面有多一点的这个议员去问问题嘛，所以明天是在 Senate， 那么在参议院的话呢，两院是人数是有显著的一个不同的。今天盘中的话呢，硬件是反弹了，软件被 IBM 的财报拖累呢，是给带动下去了。我等大家进来再进一步的去分析。这里有很多事情在同时的发生。美伊战士这一边呢，今天是周二，所以昨天在美伊的这一个问题上面呢，是大家也看到过去几天呢，是自从上一周我们看到停火呢，开始出现这一个裂缝，开始被撕破呢，地缘政治呢也是有进一步的升级的，所以我们可以看到原油呢，跟昨天 X 上面我在讨论，昨天是在看韩国股市的，韩国股市到了隧道下方的时候呢，确实反弹了，最后尾盘是上来的，延续到了今天的这一个进一步的反弹，但今天也不是纯粹的一个。因为硬件这一边，大家会去想的是不是因为软件那一边，特别是 IBM 的财报说了什么，去影响了硬件的这个反弹，一会儿会去讨论的。一会儿 Walsh 开始去演讲的时候呢，他通常是会把一份已经准备好的声明呢去给读一遍的。这个第一天和第二天的版本呢，基本上不会有什么改变的，基本上是一样的。而这一个版本呢，已经公布在美联储的官网上面了，所以他的演讲呢，台词呢，大家都可以看得到。所以一会儿他在说的时候呢，大家会说他在说什么呢？这个已经公布在官网上面了，所以我们是可以去看到呢，他去讨论是什么东西的。这个是非常长的一份这一个声明的。那么在前瞻指引角度来说的话呢，大家知道的，他已经之前讨论过，不会去给出前瞻指引了。所以大家可以看到这里面其实已经也给了不少的这一个之后会怎么样的。CPI 今天也有出来的，对，今天有太多新闻了，同时再出来去影响市场了，工作组还有各方面的都是有的，所以这个已经在美联储的官网上面。大家如果去，等一下因为我把那个做了这边翻译 Sunday News Events Testimony， 然后大家可以收到这个 Walsh。等一下我来看一下 Walsh Testimony News Events Fed。打入去搜索里面呢 ，Google 第一个弹出来的就是它的这一份的声明。So we'll take a look here。什么时候出来的？1个小时15分钟左右吧，8点半美东的时候出来的。所以今天是 House， 明天是 Senate。他上去念的时候呢，他基本上是把这一边的已经写好的致辞呢再读一遍。所以大家如果在前面在听的时候呢，如果发现是一样的话呢 ，That's where it's coming from. He's just reading off the script here。这份致辞我们是已经有的，然后后面的话呢就会进入了议员对他的问答会的模式。我把宝瑞上一次的给弄出来看一下能不能找到。对，这个是去国会山做的这个证词。We need the one from Congress。所以基本上宝瑞坐在美联储主席坐在前面，然后去回答问题。This doesn't really show what it looks like。等一下，然后我们可以看到，不同的 CEO 也会上去做这一些 hearing 的。这里是扎克的，这个是 OpenAI 的 CEO Sam Altman 上去的时候， 然后比较出名的一个是抖音的 CEO 上去的时候。所以今天是轮到了新的美联储主席。美联储主席每半年要去做一次证词的，做一次这一个陈述。Alright， 先做一下音频测试啊，大家能听到我说话的话，可以点个1。对，刚刚起来。我们这边 local time 是6:31 a.m. Sorry, 6:51 a.m. My bad. 6:51。我们先看一下沃尔说了一些什么东西。CPI 的话是比预期是少了不少的，这个是帮助了不用这么着急去加息的，因为昨天加息的几率呢是已经增加到了差不多是1半的。大家已经听到我说话的话，可以点个1。我的 X 的连接在我的右上角。昨天尾盘的话呢 ，MOC 就进来了不少买盘的20亿流入，标普500指数，QQ 纳指100指数100强指数这边，纳指100强指数这边是流入了13亿。暗指是减下去一点的，前一天是有冲上去一点，市场还是比较谨慎的。周四会有，之前我们周四上一次，川普在 Prime Time 做 Address to the Nation 的时候，我们也去做过这里的直播的，所以这个要注意一下。应该是对于美伊战事的讨论，上一次就是给了一个更新的，所以这里我们看到原油，毕竟现在到了80大关了，这是昨天的。可以看一下这一边的问题了，因为大家会说，那现在反弹了，后面会怎么样呢？后面还是要去看，今天是周二啊，所以正好在看有没有降级的塔口的去讨论出来，因为昨天的讨论的话呢，基本上都是还是在升级的，特别是继续在军事这一方面的行动，所以这一方面的利空还没有被完全的给解除掉。大家可以看到，今天有一个事件摆在这一边的，美国海军呢开始对伊朗实行再次的有这一个封锁。So we'll see what U.S. command says. 对，接近美联储在比较放鹰派，因为原油上去的话会让这一个通胀回暖的，所以现在的 CPI 呢是有滞后性的，因为美联储呢也是在看着地缘政治的影响，在看着中东的变化的。So there's the testimony. CPI 来说的话呢 ，headline 头条进来的是3.8，根据美银、Barclay、JP Morgan 各方面的，大多数的投行这一边呢都是在3.7、3.8，BNP 这一边在3.9，高盛也是在3.9的，但 median forecast 中间点是在3.8左右的，所以实际出来的话呢是大低于预期的。因为实际出来的话呢，只有3.5的非常漂亮的一份这一个 CPI， 然后如果我们去看月对比的话，这是年对比，月对比的话呢，预期是0.1，实际出来的是0.4，年化的话0.4乘以12个月的话呢是4.8的，所以这是非常大的一个月对比上面的降温。核心的话呢，2.8跌到了去2.6了。突然呢，如果我们去看到，因为先有 CPI， 明天应该有 PPI 的，所以明天的演讲这一边的话呢，是走向 PPI 这一边的。CPI、PPI 结合出来呢，我们应该是会能进一步的去见到 PCE 美联储最喜欢的指标的。突然的话呢，感觉这一个故事呢开始往不用这么着急去加息这一方面呢去走动了。所以一会儿我们去听一下 Walsh 的演讲之后呢，可以看一下。加息的几率有没有减下去？因为昨天加息的几率呢是有跑上去的，昨天基本上是接近了1半的几率呢，在2周之后 Kevin Walsh 出来的时候呢，去讨论的时候呢，会有这种加息的可能性的。可以看到市场是抬高到了46.5的，接近1半的几率的。今天这个数字呢，被 CPI 的报告应该打下去了不少了，但是油价还是挺高的。So not necessary， 还是要看一下 Kevin Walsh 是怎么样的一个说法的。我来看一下有没有很多1。 Yeah, you see the ones there, so everything is good. 大家可以看到的 ，destroyed. The odds of a rate hike are basically destroyed over here. 基本上大幅度的下降。昨天加息的几率呢，高位的时候是接近一半的。我的 Xpost 上面有46的这一边，大家可以看到，今天在多少呢？14.4，跌了30多点。因为这一份 CPI 报告呢，降温降的真的是比较的是多。有没有别的风险？有油价的那个通胀的风险的，但显然市场呢把这个降低了非常多的。Like for comparison， 还有4分钟，差不多应该那一边就要开始了。I have it open already. The ticker is down to 3 minutes. 41.7，一周前呢26.7的几率的，所以这个14.4呢，差不多是回到了1个月前的这一个点位的，也就代表呢，大多数的反指呢应该是下来了，美元暴跌，美债收益率应该也是一样的，这些都是反指啊。美债收益率呢大跌，已经回去了一点的美债收益率，因为前面我们在等 TACO 交易，是因为美债收益率呢又逼近了5.1去5.2的，特别是30年。大家可以看到这里反弹上去，30年还是很快的，留在高位的5.08的。因为通常我们去看，不管是解放日关税或者前面一些动静呢，通常美债收益率到了这种非常高的一种水平呢，为了去稳定住美债市场呢，通常我们会见到这一个 TACO 交易的，所以在等这一个点。盘中的话，半导体在走强。基本上前面我们看到轮动的嘛，软件应用，然后走向半导体的。但今天软件有巨大的利空，所以那边是普跌的。软件应用板块呢都是在领跌股这边的，道指受了非常重挫，因为里面的成员虽然银行股、金融那一边呢是走强的，在财报之后，先看一遍啊。Yeah, it's going strong here. 做了财报之后。XLF 也就是金融板块，我们来看一下 ，it shot up， 所以那边是没有太大的一个问题，因为财报季已经开始了。但是软件这一边呢，是在说这个钱呢是在往 AI 基建这一边去走动，所以软件在业绩这一边呢是不及预期的。So we see a big shift there。之前呢是有讨论的嘛，也就是说软件应用板块啊。会不会被代替啊？还有各方面的，这一次是在财报里面呢，实际的露出了业绩上面的走弱，还有这一个偏差的，而这个资金呢是流向 AI 基建的，所以在建设上面的，所以我们可以看到之前的这个故事呢被延续出来，这些 AI 基建股呢就开始在反弹了。道指里面的成员是有像 Salesforce 这一些的，所以。这些公司今天是被拖下来的，但是低开高走，2.45了，已经反弹了。前面跌幅比较深一点的，5%到6%左右。IGV 软件应用板块的指数呢，前面是跌了差不多4的，现在已经直线的反弹上来了。So see what happens。软件硬件这一边的话呢，也要比较小心冲高回落的。SOXL 盘前的话呢，幅度是更加大一点的，应该有10几个点的，所以现在已经回落了一点了，市场走得不稳。右上角大家可以看到英伟达、特斯拉涨幅在1%之内，英伟达在205，特斯拉在400附近。标普500指数反弹到了7540 ，and we're gonna get Kevin Warsh here。随时开始。一开始的时候是介绍和那份致辞的，所以我们先看一下演讲这一边怎么说法。这是 Kevin Warsh 在他的致辞里面 ，Underlying inflation over long time horizons is determined largely by monetary policy。所以这里指向通胀来说的话呢，因为大家会说的嘛，美联储的双方针，现在是在看就业呢，还是在看通胀 ？Kevin Warsh 的重点呢是摆在了物价稳定，摆在通胀这一边的。然后看一下怎么样把这个问题解决掉，毕竟已经5年呢，联储是没有去达到了2%的通胀目标的。So this is still going on here。一会儿在 House 这一边，we'll see what the questions are。今天Dell也涨了不少，6.12。第一个财报先上去的这一周是，今天全部都是大投行嘛和银行嘛，花旗、高盛，摩根大通、美银、富国银行，全部都是有做出这一个财报的。 明天盘前是欧洲这一边的 ASML，投行这一边的话呢，大摩还有 BlackRock 布莱德这份我比较重视。还有后面如果有 KKR 的话，因为要看一下私人信贷的担忧。周四盘前呢，我们会迎来联合健康、台积电公布了这一个monthly update revenue 那一边也是非常亮眼的，在那个月的业绩上面。然后周四盘后就是第一份大的科技的财报，台积电盘后还会有 ISRG。对生物科技股非常重要的一家公司。下一周是特斯拉跟 Google，作为7强的2位成员呢，是首先会有财报的。So we have back-to-back streams。周三我们会有这一个特斯拉的7月22号，下周三，然后Google 就是在它的转天，基本上。All right。So this is going to start。这里上面也有它的这个连接的 ，you can watch live here。It goes to the same link。这是在那个众议院这一边的同一个连接 ，just goes to the same place。今天是留在官网上面。So we're at the U.S. House Committee on Financial Services。这个是在美国众议院的金融服务的委员会的这一个听证上面。So we're gonna get 美联储主席 Walsh 的演讲。Fed has no tolerance for persistently elevated inflation， 所以这里是重申，就是Walsh这边的在重申，美联储呢是不会去姑息通胀的，特别是持高的这个通胀。今天 Jamie Dimon 摩根大通的 CEO 呢也是在担忧，也是在讨论这一方面的多重风险嘛。地缘政治紧张局势、顽固的通胀。全球大规模的财政的赤字以及资产价格偏高等等，因为今天是摩根大通的这一个美国最大的银行的财报，所以刚那边CEO Jamie Dimon 是去在讨论这一些风险的。Underlying inflation over longer time horizons is determined largely by monetary policies。所以在看长线角度，时间海岸也是通胀呢也都是被货币政策去影响的。所以美联储这一边影响的实际上是哪个角度的呢？是需求，供应他们解决不了。譬如说有房屋问题，他们不可以去建造多一点房屋出来的，他们控制的是需求的，也就是大家的在美国这边大家的这一个钱包。They control demand. If we get policy right, and we will, the inflation surge for the last 5 years will be a thing of the past. 这个就是我刚刚说的那个点，就是把通胀给解决掉，因为今天应该。这2天呢，应该是不会去缺少呢，有来自于议员这一边的这个质问呢，就是为什么美联储5年呢还没有达到2%的通胀目标？Household consumption growth is moderate. Manufacturing output has moved up steadily this year. 生产来说的话呢，是有往上。Here we go. 制造业这一个生产今年稳步的增长，但家庭消费增长温和。Housing sector continues to lag， 房屋市场那边呢还是比较是延缓。Economic activity is expanding at a solid pace， 这个跟前面的那个演讲差不多是一样的，也就是经济还是在非常稳健的在扩展。This is interesting， 因为 GDP now 呢是跌到了1字头，没有在2字头这一边。亚特兰大最新的 GDP now 的这一个数据呢，是显示美国的 GDP 呢是放缓的速度的，特别是在 Kevin Walsh 的演讲在6月中那边之后呢，是基本上有很大的一个跌幅，因为他演讲之前，这里6月23号嘛，还有3的，现在是跌到了1点多的，在1.3左右，所以前面的直播我们有讨论过这一点。All right, they're starting.
His first appearance before Congress as our new chairman of the Federal Reserve.
这是 Kevin Walsh 第一次作为美联储主席呢，出现在国会山这边，在众议院。
Of double-dip inflation from the 1970s and early 1980s, and the actions of then-Chairman Paul Volcker was forced to take to defeat it. To know why this second surge needs to be stopped. There's no more punishing tax on American industry or on the hard-working, innovative citizens of our nation than inflation. In its first statement under your leadership, Mr. Chairman, the FOMC said that it, quote, will deliver price stability, close quote. Congress expects the Fed to remain focused on that mission and keep it until price stability is achieved. Today, we face the consequences of some of the Fed's former choices. In August 2020, the Federal Reserve adopted a flexible average inflation targeting framework in which it decided to allow inflation to run, open quote, moderately above 2% for some time, close quote, after periods in which it had been running persistently below 2%. This framework, combined with the irresponsible fiscal policy and a slow response to inflation that began in March 2021, led to an inflationary surge the likes of which had not been seen since those early 1980s. In 2025, the Fed wisely abandoned its flexible average inflation targeting framework. Going back further today, we will also review the consequences of the Fed's experiments with large-scale purchases of treasuries and agency mortgage-backed securities, better known as quantitative easing, or QE. Though perhaps justified in its first round during the immediate onset of the 2008 global financial crisis, long past that crisis, the Fed repeatedly expanded QE, with the cost of each successive round of QE higher and benefits lower. And while the emergency facilities in QE were resurrected in early 2020 in response to the unknown economic and social ramifications of the COVID-19 pandemic, yet with a clear V-shaped recovery well underway, those facilities and policies were not ended and promptly phased out. The result of these decisions was a Fed that held a quarter of the federal debt in 2022, and though that share has decreased, it still creates incentives for fiscal policymakers to avoid the tough decisions on debt and deficits today and leave the consequences to our kids and grandkids. You've said recently that inflation is a choice. I want to echo this and say that debt and deficits are also a choice. For years, the Congress chooses unrestrained deficits and out-of-control debt and has repeatedly drafted the Fed into being an enabler. Both, in my view, have to stop. Turning to the Fed's regulatory and supervisory policy in the recent past, the Fed has engaged in mission creep, resulting from political capture by certain partisan actors attempting to accomplish policies through the Fed on which they cannot build a consensus and pass through the Congress. From crusades against digital assets to trying to make the Fed a climate regulator, these decisions took the Fed far beyond the boundaries that Congress has
现在发言的
authorized.
是美国众议院金融
Not
服
the
务
Fed's role to make
委员
decisions
会
for
的
the
主
American
席
people on major
共和党议
questions
员
of
French
political
Hill
and。economic significance. That's Congress's responsibility.
所以这里是去
The
看
Fed
美联
needs to
储
avoid repeating the mistakes of the past and reform itself
怎么
to
样可以去
guard
避免历史
long-term
上
monetary
之
policy
前去做过的一些
independence
错误，
and restore the reputation of the Fed in an apolitical
去恢复
agent
美联储
carrying
的这
out
一个信誉。
Congress's statutory directives. I look forward to your testimony today, Mr. Chairman, and
所
I
以这里还
thank
是
you.
指向这一个
Now
通
I
胀
want to
目标呢
recognize
是没有
our
去达到板
distinguished
砖。
ranking member of the committee, Mrs. Waters, for 4 minutes for an opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Hill. Chairman Walsh, you're taking the helm of the Federal Reserve at an important moment. Congress designed the Fed to stand apart from politics so that it can support stable prices, maximum employment, financial stability, and the long-term interest of the American people, and not the personal interests of a president. Today, working families are being crushed by the rising cost of living. They pay more at the grocery store, more at the gas pump, and more for housing than they did a year ago. Just today, the Bipartisan Joint Economic Committee reported that Americans have paid a total of $56.4 billion more in gas since Trump began his endless war with Iran. That's $477 for each household in America. In fact, the Federal Reserve's own research shows that 1 in 10 Americans skips meals because they simply cannot afford it. Workers are also worried about what artificial intelligence means for their jobs and their financial security. The one common thread of all of this is Trump, whose policies and actions made the economy and the concerns of American people so much worse. His tariffs have driven up costs for consumers and businesses. His attacks on independent financial regulators have undermined confidence in the mission of institutions that have protected the public. His war in the Middle East, which has no end, continues to hurt gas and grocery prices. Despite this pain being felt by American families, there is one family making fistful of money, the first family. The Trump family has earned more than $2 billion since Trump returned to office, primarily from new crypto ventures that Trump's administration is supposed to oversee. Yet instead of addressing these growing conflicts of interest, Republicans are legitimatizing all of them. They blocked all efforts to stop this profiteering when they passed the stablecoin and crypto legislation. Chair Walsh, I understand you have committed to divesting all of your financial assets to avoid conflicts of interest. That should also be the case for the President of the United States of America. Turning to the
这
Federal
是在
Reserve,
呼吁
Trump
这
has
一个美联
repeatedly
储
attacked
主席
her
沃尔什必须保持
predecessor,
独立性，
Chairman Jerome
不受
Powell,
到外来
because
的
he
因素的影
refused to
响，
kiss the ring
都是来自于
and
川普
bend
这一边。
monetary policy to the president's demands. His administration continues to try to remove your colleague, Governor Lisa Cook. I hope we hear from you today how exactly you will defend your colleagues and the Federal Reserve. You should also take no comfort in the Supreme Court's shielding the Fed when it overturned Humphrey's executor. The court vastly expanded presidential authority over independent agencies, and it is likely to still come for other functions of the Fed, like bank supervision next. Committed Democrats will continue fighting to protect the independence of the Fed and other agencies, strengthen consumer protections, and build on an economy that prioritizes working families, not the president, the wealthy or the well-connected. So I look forward to your testimony today. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman yields back. I now recognize the chair of the Task Force on Monetary Policy, Treasury Market Resilience, and Economic Prosperity, Mr. Lucas of Oklahoma, for a 1-minute opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome Chairman Walsh to your first hearing as chairman, and congratulations on your confirmation. We look forward to your testimony today on the Monetary Policy Report. In your first meeting, you announced a number of welcome reforms, including establishing 5 task forces that many members are eager to get your thoughts on. For example, former Chair Powell had committed to review some of the Fed's communication tools. And although we expected that to be completed last August, alongside the review of the consensus statement, it is yet to happen. A review of the Fed's communication tools is long overdue, and we look forward to your focus on completing that project through the task force. We also spent time this Congress examining the composition and the size of the Fed's balance sheet, an effort that you are now undertaking at the Fed. It is vital that the Fed get this right. We welcome continued collaboration on that front. I have a lot to talk about today. I look forward to your testimony and our discussion, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Lucas. I recognize the ranking member of the Task Force on Monetary Policy, Treasury Market Resilience, and Economic Prosperity,
刚刚是
Mr.
在
Vargas of
去
California,
讨
for a
论，就是
1-minute
通过
opening
今天
statement.
讨论会去
Thank you,
真正
Mr.
的这
Chairman
一个听证会去
and Ranking Member
了解
Waters
更加多
for
对
calling
工作
this
组的
hearing.
这个发
Further,
展，
thank you,
特别是在通
Chairman
信这一方
Warsh,
面。
for coming before this committee, especially so early on after being confirmed. Public service is a noble undertaking, as you know, so thank you once again for taking it on. We appreciate it. I enjoyed our conversation last week, and as ranking member of the Task Force on Monetary Policy, Treasury Market Resilience, and Economic Prosperity, I will remain vigilant of the actions you take as chairman. The independence of the Federal Reserve is my top concern. No influence from the president or others to raise or lower interest rates whenever they want to. That independence is one of the essential pieces that maintained the strength and reliability of the U.S. monetary policy. I encourage you and the entire Federal Reserve to keep that independence, the betterment of all of us, not just a few. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Today, we welcome the testimony of the Honorable Kevin Warsh, Chairman of the Federal Reserve Board of Governors. Chairman Warsh, we thank you for taking time to be with us today. You'll be recognized for 5 minutes to give an oral presentation of your written testimony without objection. Your
现在
testimony
是
will be
Kevin
made
Warsh
part
呢
of the
去
record.
再读一
I
遍
now
刚我在
recognize
给
you
大家
for
看的这一
5
份致辞
minutes.
这是提前已经写好的。
Thank you very much, Chairman Hill, Ranking Member Waters, other members of the committee, good morning. It's a real privilege to join you. At my very first appearance here before this panel, I'm particularly honored to represent my superb colleagues from the Federal Reserve System. In submitting the monetary policy report, as is our obligation and our duty, I think of a long line of central bank chiefs that have appeared in this very room before Congress in keeping with the Federal Reserve Act. One of the largest figures in Federal Reserve history is Alan Greenspan, who passed away about a month ago after a century of life. We at the Fed recall the chairman's strong and steady leadership,
这我是在致
strong
敬 Alan
hands
Greenspan。
in a period of rapid economic change. And today we honor his memory. As a country, we just marked our 250th year. And when Americans count our blessings, we include an economy predicated on the brilliance of our constitutional design and a system of ordered liberty. An economy without equal in all it's done for human flourishing. Some forms of Fed communications, which I've spoken about previously, are discretionary, but not this one, and for good reason. It's a prudent and wisely conceived obligation designed to keep the Fed accountable, responsible, and faithful to its congressional mandate of full employment and price stability. These obligations are of a piece with the Fed's rightful independence in the conduct of monetary policy. Stepping back, I would say today as we sit here, Mr. Chairman, we're at a hinge point in history. It's up to all of us to meet this moment. The task for this generation of policymakers and of individuals and households in the private sector is to ensure that the American economy excels far into the future. Now, at the Fed, our number one objective is getting monetary policy right. That's our clear and constant aim, the star we steer by. And if we get policy right, and I can assure you we will, the inflation surge of the last 5 years will be a thing of the past.
我始终
Just
是
a
会
month
把
ago, I chaired
通
my
胀给
very
控制
first
住。
meeting of the
过去5年没有解
FOMC.
决的这个通胀问题。
My colleagues and I recognize that high inflation has been an undue burden on American households and businesses. And while monthly price volatilities and variations are inevitable, especially in an unsettled world, underlying inflation over longer time horizons is determined largely by monetary policy. As the chairman said at the outset, inflation's a choice. The members of our committee have no tolerance for persistently elevated inflation, and we share a resolute commitment to ensure price stability. This was the focus of our June meeting, at which we decided to hold the target range in the Fed funds rate at 3.5 to 3.75%. Now, naturally, our work at the Fed demands a proper reading on economic conditions. As you see in our report, economic activity grew at a solid pace, showing remarkable resilience in the face of recent developments. Household consumption, moderate. Manufacturing output, it moved up steadily this past year. The housing sector, however, gives a somewhat different picture and continues to lag. I want to highlight the most striking feature of this economy right now, and it's business investment. The rapid pace, which appears to be accelerating, reflects in part the construction of data centers and other infrastructure, and the immense demand for AI-related equipment and software. Investment in equipment overall increased about 8% for the year in the first quarter. Within that category, high-tech spending logged an especially impressive growth rate of nearly 25%. At the Fed, we don't yet know fully the extent to which the economy will benefit from AI. Yet it seems inevitable that that which we're now calling AI investment will soon just be called investment. Even so, new opportunities for the economy introduce new challenges for central bankers. We at the Fed are monitoring the implications for employment
这一
and
看我
for
们是在
inflation.
讨论 AI 的投资
That
呢，
brings me
给经济
briefly,
带
I'll
来
end
快速
here
的
so
增
I
长。
don't go afoul of the time commitment to the supply side of the economy, which deserves equal measure of discussion. Productivity growth has been strong, predating gains from AI adoption. America's labor force appears stable. Job creation has in fact kept pace with the workforce. The unemployment rate is low and changed little over the last year. And we've seen relatively few layoffs. In
劳动市
fine,
场
in
这一件是
closing,
没
I
有
will say
显示
this.
出来太多的问
I
题，
came
非
to
常
my
稳
new
定。
position as a believer in the very best of the Fed's traditions. I'm heartened by the welcome I've received and by the encouragement of my colleagues in considering how best to advance the conduct of monetary policy. We have a duty to point this institution forward, to take a fresh look at current practices, to make sure we're serving the objectives you gave us, and we're going about it systematically. I've appointed task forces that you've already referenced in 5 key areas to improve the broad conduct of monetary policy. 1, Fed communications. 2, our balance sheet policy. 3, our use of existing data sources. 4th, productivity and jobs in an era of remarkable transformation. And 5, and not least important, the Fed's inflation frameworks. The purpose of this initiative is to equip the Fed to make better decisions in monetary policy and put these years of high inflation behind us.
看沃尔
We're
是在
starting
说
a new
声，
chapter, Mr.
工
Chairman
作
of
组
the
呢能
Federal
帮助美联
Reserve.
储做更加好的
In
决
this
定和选择。
consequential time for our nation, I can
对于
report
货
to
币政
you
策的
that we at the
采取
Fed
的时候，
intend to be fit for purpose and focused on the future. We are the Federal Reserve, Mr. Chairman, and we're determined as ever to fulfill the mission that Congress has given us. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I welcome your questions.
好，刚刚的这一
Mr.
份
Warsh,
致辞
we'll
呢
now，turn to member questions.
现在是
I'll
到了
recognize
问答会了
myself for 5 minutes. As outlined in your statement, inflation is the result of many factors.
Sorry.
Of these, the Fed has control only
刚的那
over
份证
one.
词呢，我刚在
Monetary
找，
policy
是在
is
那个美联
expressed
储官网上的。
through its interest rate and balance sheet
直播
policy.
前面我们已经给大家看
Today, a
过了，
potential
所
second
以市
surge
场
of
没做出反应，因为这个2 个
inflation
小
is
时
appearing due
前
to，factors
差不多2个
outside
小时
the
前就已
Fed's
经有了。
control. What the Fed can't control is how it reacts. Though upward pressure on prices may
所以刚刚的
diminish
那个
on
致
its
辞
own,
不是
it's
新的
not a
资
sure
料，
thing.
是2
The
个小
Fed may
时
be
多
able
前
to look
的这
through
个。
these inflationary pressures,
已经大家
but
能
the
看
Fed
到
has believed that before and has been wrong. High inflation affects Americans in the here and now, not in some hypothetical future composed of long-term projections or of inflation expectations. Mr. Chairman, I was very encouraged to hear both in your testimony and your opening FOMC statement about restoring price stability as a top priority for you. When we think about that in the near term, though, how do you and your colleagues on the Open Market Committee plan to accomplish that given the policy tools at your disposal?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We want economic growth to be more broad-based, and we want the change in prices, the increase in inflation, to be more limited. There are a lot of things that are happening that are outside of our control, as you mentioned, conflicts overseas and the rest. We can't have and shouldn't have a direct control on that. But inflation's a choice. We monetary policymakers need to choose lower prices, and that's the commitment my colleagues have made. In direct answer to your question, I would say we're doing 3 things. 1, commitment, which you heard at our first FOMC meeting, and I hope you heard today, is we're committed to the Fed to deliver price stability. We're committed to the 2% inflation goal. And so for businesses or households or market participants who came into this saying, well, they said before they were committed, but they seem to have tolerated a higher level of inflation, that commitment is resolute. Second thing that we can do is take ownership. This isn't a time for us to pass the buck, to blame others. The Federal Reserve can and will deliver price stability. We have the tools that you mentioned, both interest rates and balance sheet policy, that can help us achieve that aim. And we have the tools to deliver that. So it's a function of commitment, responsibility, and tools, and we're 3 for 3, and we'll deliver.
Thank you. A reference in my opening
我是
statement
在重
about
申
the
呢，会把
2020
物价
decision
稳定呢给控制好，
on
通
tolerating
胀是一
higher
个选择，
inflation, and that it's
把
now
这
been
是
abandoned
联储会
by
进一步
the
的去把通
board.
胀呢
Clearly, I think that was a
带回来这个目标
policy
的。
error. It was praised by some at the time in August of 2020, but I found it alarming at the time it took place. First of all, do you agree with the FOMC's decision to abandon that? And secondly, how do you consider this past 6 years of experience when you look at the task force work on the framework question for looking at inflation?
Yeah, so there's no secret that at the time that the framework in 2020 was announced, the new framework, which was intended to get inflation higher, that at the time and in subsequent years before finding my way into this job, I was very critical of it. That central bank wasn't the first central bank to ask for a little more inflation and end up with a lot more. It was a mistake. The framework did not succeed in its objectives, and I am pleased that before my arrival, that my predecessors took that and cast it aside. All central bankers are going to make some share of mistakes, but when they make a mistake, they've got to call it out. Had that mistake been called out sooner, I don't believe we would have been burdened with this undue tax over the last 5 years. It's nearly the same degree. That's why we are reform-oriented. That's why my colleagues and I are so driven by these task forces to think about them anew. And in final response, I'd just say one of the task forces you mentioned is to revisit the inflation frameworks that the Federal Reserve uses so that we can better understand what will cause inflation to rise and fall and what we can do about it.
Well, thank you. And you also referenced courage in your opening statement, and you've just outlined the toughness of the set of policy choices that you and your fellow governors have. So difficult that your longtime predecessor, Arthur Burns, described that mission as the anguish of central banking to try to cope with the different structures. So in the last seconds I have left, will your task force work review the issue of what you have control over versus what is in the control of the Congress and regulatory and executive branch authority?
Yeah, I'll be brief in my response given the time. There's no anguish in central banking here, Mr. Chairman. We have the commitment, the power, and the responsibility to deliver on the mandate that this committee gave us, and we will. We've got full ability to do it, so you will not hear me blaming anyone else.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My time has expired, and I recognize the ranking member, Mrs. Waters, for questions for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr.
每一位
Chairman.
议员呢是有大约5分钟的时间去做这一个
Section
问答。
10 of the Federal Reserve Act states, and I quote, "No member of the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System shall be an officer or director of any bank, banking institution, trust company, or Federal Reserve Bank, or hold stock in any bank, banking institution, or trust company," quote unquote. This prohibition ensures there's no conflict of interest arising from your role in making decisions as a regulator that could lead to your personal profit. Yes or no? Do you think that's a sensible prohibition?
Check your mic, Mr.
Excuse me, Ranking Member. It's the law you've written, and it's the law we will follow.
Let me keep going. Vice Chair Bauman and FDIC Chair Hill testified last year that this prohibition is good public policy as it ensures that bank regulators serve the public's best interest and not their own. Now, unfortunately, President Trump undermined the independence of financial regulators, mandating the White House must now review and approve regulatory rules put forward by banking regulators, including the Fed, except when it comes to monetary policy. And instead of focusing on the job Americans elected him to do, the president grossly profiting off of his position to the extent the president and other executive branch officials now have a say in regulations in the Fed issues. Chair Walsh, should those officials be prohibited from owning any businesses where they have a role in regulating them, whether it is crypto company or bank or anything else? Yes or no?
So, Ranking Member Waters, I don't mean to disappoint you, but we're going to stay in our lane at the Federal Reserve. The more we stay in our lane, the more we stay out of politics. The rules and obligations for others outside the Federal Reserve are not something at which I feel it's appropriate for me to opine.
I have here President Trump's
所以我
most
是重申一下
recent
这个美
financial
联储不讨
disclosure,
论这一个政
which
治，
shows that Trump
尽
made
量是
billions
留
of
在自己
dollars
的跑道
in
里
the first year of
，stay in
his
our lane。
presidency, the bulk of which came from his family's crypto businesses, all while he is responsible for overseeing the agencies regulating crypto. This is an egregious conflict of interest, and Congress must put an end to it. Now, I want to just show you, in case you haven't had time to look yet.
这是在讨论
This is
川
the
普的
president's
财经的
disclosure
披露，
of his
这
financial
不是在
interests.
加密币方面
This is how many pages? 900. This is 900 pages of financial interest. When you have time, I want you to go through them so that you'll know and understand exactly what I'm talking about. So let me ask you, do you believe we must put an end to it?
Ranking member, you've given us a big job. We've begun in 6 short weeks to tackle the big job, and I'm focused on that.
所以这里是在讨论这一个 conflict of
Well, let
interest，
me
其实是
just
利
go
益冲突
further。with the prediction markets.
因为一方面是
I'm
可以
deeply
去
concerned by the potential for regulators to profit
在
from
加
the
密币
use
这一
of
边政策
material
上面有影
non-public
响。
information on prediction markets. There's a
另外
pattern
一
of
方面是有来
insiders
自于这一
appearing
个
to
加密
profit
币的这一
ahead
个
of
利益的，
market
所
moving
以
Trump
这边也是
administration
让
decisions.
美联储去
Like
看
when
一下。
officials with close ties to the administration make trades prior to major tariff announcements. Chair Wash, what oversight does the Fed conduct over its employees with regard to insider trading? And given the rise of prediction markets, is the Fed increasing its oversight
同时是
for
让
its employees
美联储这一边呢
profiting
再
from the
再去
use
讨
of
论
material
怎么监管自己的
non-profit
员工，
information?
没有这一些利益冲突。
Ranking member, at the end of my very first week on the job, I sent a letter to the 23,000 employees of the Fed, reminding them the best of the Fed's traditions, which is our culture. And included in that culture is integrity. Included in that culture is ensuring that we abide by the law and the very highest standards. That's a commitment that we've made to each other and will make to you.
Well, thank you. Chair Wash, in
或者是
2019,
说，
I
刚
posed
一
a
上任
simple
的时候
question
呢，
to
就
former
发给
Chair
美联储
Powell.
员工呢，
I asked
让
if you
他
get
们
a
去
call from the
这个要
president,
去遵守
and
法
he
律。
said, I'm firing you.
另外一边是
Pack up
维持这个信誉。
and it's time to go. What would you do? Chair Powell said, of course, I would not do that. The answer would be no.
Gentlewoman's time has expired.
I asked further. He does not want me to go any further. Do you think the president doesn't have
He
the
can answer
authority?
that answer. He can give you an answer in writing, and I'm sure he will do
I
that
want the
in a
public to
timely
hear.
way. Thank you so much. The chair recognizes the chair of our task force monetary policy, Mr. Lucas of Oklahoma. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Chairman, I
好，前
want
面
to
指数
start
回
off
落了一下，
discussing
但是
the
这
task
会儿又
force
上来了，
you've
标普百指数
created.
从
Clearly,
右上
Chairman
角。
Hill's monetary policy task
754附近
force idea is catching fire.
但硬件半导体那一边呢，确实有回落
What
一
do
点
you
的，抛售压力
anticipate
比
the
较大。
result of the task forces to be? Can we expect public reports or other documents? How do you envision presenting the results of these findings, Mr. Chairman?
Thank you very much. Right now, they're in discovery mode. I've given the 5 task forces a tall task to go back to first principles, see what we're doing, see what can be improved upon. They were starting with a blank sheet of paper, and you had a highly credible central bank running the most important monetary policy in the world. What would we do? Are there existing practices we could improve upon? Are there hard questions we could answer? The changes in the economy relevant to that? In terms of disclosure, we're going to make sure that the external independent task forces, which are staffed by some superb Fed staffers, that they get to share their views first with the decision makers. There are going to be 19 of us around the table that are committed to listen to them with an open mind and make decisions. But there's going to be nothing held in secret here. This is a public discussion on these 5, and I'm happy to share the results and the thinking periodically between now and the end of the year, at which point I hope we've got some real conclusions.
Of course, the committee task force is very sensitive on this thing. Let's move to the communications and balance sheet. A concern I raised with your predecessor is the potential for confusion on the purpose of adjustments to the Fed's balance sheet, absent clear and frequent communication. For example, the trading desk announced yesterday it's continuing the $10 billion in bill purchases this period, presumably to maintain ample reserves. I understand not wanting to preempt the work of the communications task force, but can you share your thoughts on balance sheet policy communication? will you make it clear to the markets when shrinking the balance sheet is intended to tighten monetary policy rather than a deregulatory effort to avoid market distortions?
Yeah, you raise a couple of very good points. First, that some of the boundaries of these task forces will overlap. In some sense, each of the task forces are charged with obligations that are ultimately the FOMC and the Board of Governors. So the Communications Task Force and the Balance Sheet Task Force, there might be some overlap in their work. Let me cut to the chase. The balance sheet policies since the global financial crisis when I last served, the balance sheet regime has changed quite significantly. The size and duration of assets the Fed's holding have changed massively. They changed first in a period of crisis. That was the design of this new balance sheet policy. I don't want to prejudge decisions that this task force makes, but it's no secret of my long-held views, and I'll just state them three ways. One is the balance sheet is part of monetary policy. Monetary policy is made both through interest rates and through the balance sheet policies. The balance sheet isn't merely about plumbing. So that's point one. Second, I want to assure you that if there were a change in balance sheet policy, that we would preview it, explain it, debate it, and no changes in balance sheet policy would happen without good advance notice to the likes of this committee and broadly financial markets. And three, as we think about balance sheet policy, we at the Federal Reserve have to do, I think, a strong and compelling job to stay clear of fiscal policy. We want to be out of the fiscal policy business, which is between you and the Treasury Secretary and the President, and focus on monetary policy. Those are among the big questions I've asked this group of three distinguished leaders to take on, and I look forward to hearing what they have to say about it.
前面先是工作组的讨论，然后后面去到了这个美联储的资产负债表。所以工作组有改变了各方面的话呢，会跟这边的委员会，还有给公众这边呢，是去做讨论的。
How are you thinking about financial stability and the threat of fiscal dominance as Congress fails to get spending under control?
然后美联储会远离这一个fiscal policy， 也就是财政部在管的这些财政的策略。
It's an excellent question. As we sit here today, the average duration, that is the average outstanding stock of assets that are held by the Fed and U.S. Treasuries is about 6.5 years. The treasuries that held in the market are about 4.5 years. I understand in periods of crises, like the 2020 pandemic and the 2008 crisis, central banks by design needing to step into markets to create a fair price. But in more benign times, when our overall holdings are larger than the market, that's something where monetary policy is, in the language of former Chairman Volcker, on the edge of its authority. These are among the questions that this task force will look at.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes the ranking member of the House Small Business Committee, Ms. Velasquez of New York, for 5 minutes.
Right here. Welcome to the committee. I would like to start with a straightforward, simple question. Do you work for Donald Trump? Yes or no?
这位议员直接去单刀切入去问了啊。
If I'm permitted to say, we're an independent central bank. We're honored to be independent. Our independence came from you.
Okay, that's enough. Thank you. What steps would you take if the president or others in the administration target you or your fellow governors because he doesn't like how many of them are voting on interest rate policy?
It's not my intuition to engage in hypotheticals, but I'll tell you this: the Supreme Court said
That's an easy way out.
The Supreme Court said that the Federal Reserve and the conduct of monetary policy is independent. To the extent there were questions about it, the courts answered those questions.
So what would you do?
这在讨论前面最高法院的
I would continue to do my job.
审判。
Okay, good. Chair Walsh, do you agree that current monetary policy exists in an extremely polarized and politicized environment?
Outside the four walls of the Federal Reserve, there's no doubt a lot of politics. But my goal inside the central bank is for there to be no politics. To the extent there's politics there, we're going to get rid of them.
Well, I, along with many on my side, will say that
免责的外围的影响有很多
firings
政治
of a
的，
sitting Fed
但是
governor
像
and
美联储
Fed
内部
chair
呢
in
是
the
没有
central
去
bank's
有这些政治影响。
111-year history is quite the politicization and polarization of the Fed. Chair Walsh, at your nomination hearing a few months ago, you said, and I state, I am committed to ensuring that the conduct of monetary policy remains strictly independent. You just said that. Are you still committed to conducting independent monetary policy today?
Absolutely.
Given the current mistrust of government and the political environment surrounding your appointment, the decision to limit communications and offload Fed objectives to clandestine task forces with no clear transparency calls your motivations into question. Can you commit today to institute an explanatory framework that details the reasoning of the Fed's actions following policy changes?
I'm here today, Congressman, to do just that. And I think I've demonstrated in my first 6 or 7 weeks in office a commitment to independence and a commitment to reform. Those two are of common importance, and I'm going to deliver on both of them.
I'm glad to hear that. Chair Walsh, at your first post-AOMC meeting as chair, you were asked how you intend to handle Fed communications going forward. You answered, and I quote, "We made some changes today. I expect more changes to come, and some of those might well be worthy of a press conference." To me, that is not a very definitive standard. Can you commit today to creating a fixed public standard for which FOMC decisions and procedural changes trigger a press conference rather than deciding case by case which ones might be worth it? Yes or no?
So if I can be a slightly longer than yes or no, the last 63 months, maybe 64 months of high inflation above the Fed's objective suggests that it is immediately important to think about reforms, including in communications, and that's what we're going to do. I don't expect any of the change in communications to be about hiding the ball. The purpose of a change in communications is to do one thing right, which is to get monetary policy
I
right.
hear you, but are you instituting any standards that will qualify for a press conference as a worth news for the public and hear us in Congress?
So in a word, yes, and we have a task force that's going to help us think about how to do that and do a better job of getting policy right and
So
making
can-
sure that you know what we're doing and why.
Can you give me a
针对在
single
communications 通
objective
信上面呢，
or criteria
工作组会继
right
续
now
去
on how
探索和
you
研
will
发，
determine whether or not a change
但是
of
不是
the
为了
Fed
去隐
is
藏一些东
significant
西。
enough for you to hold a press conference on it?
Mr. Chairman, I'd invite you to answer that question in writing, please, for the gentlewoman from New York. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas. Mr. Sessions, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Chairman, welcome. We're delighted that you're here. This is your first time here, but you'll get used to coming back. You'll be here twice a year. So your report to
这依然是
Congress
在
is
重新
important, and we do
去
count
那
on the
个提
factual
醒
nature
天沃什一
of
下的，
that.
每半年
I'd
都要
like
来
to
一次。
refer, if I can, to
所
three
以会开始
questions
熟
and
悉
allow
这一
you
边
to
的
speak instead of
环境。
myself most of the time. Number one, housing interest rates, that would be on page 21 and 37. Then understanding better the agricultural stability of that marketplace. I represent a hugely agricultural district. And second, or lastly, the labor market outlook, that's page 16. I'll let the gentleman please move forward, and I'll prompt you now on the first one, housing interest rates. You would please talk to us, your view of that. It's higher than what I want, but you're the person that's in the seat today.
So as I mentioned in my opening statement, prepared remarks, the economy is solid. Financial markets look like they're in very good condition. When we look at housing markets, the story is much more uneven. 30-year fixed rate mortgages, which is really the relevance of much of this discussion to a lot of hardworking
high.
Americans, it's higher than it's been, and in part, that's because of inflation that has been above the Fed's objectives.
Okay, and looking forward,
这是在讨论房市场，
We
就
have
是
Ergo,
30
what
年
can we
房
look
贷
at
呢
you
非
and
常的
say,
高，
what is our
但是
new
开门沃什
chairman
说这些
going
影响
to
来自于
do
通胀。
about that?
So he's going to deliver price stability with his colleagues at the FOMC. And what we can do in making sure that people are confident that the change in prices is at such a level they don't have to think about it and they don't have to talk about it. That is consistent with long-term treasury yields being lower, and that's also consistent with mortgages being more affordable.
Well, I agree with that, and I'll look forward to that. Agricultural
所以这里美
outlook,
联储呢
as
是
you
会
know,
继续的去想办法的
farms,
去稳定物
farmers,
价，
the
这样子人
farm
民不用去讨论它。
economy is going through some changes. Your viewpoint on that?
As you know, the Fed does not
也就是把
target
长线的通
particular
胀预期呢给
sectors, but that
控制
doesn't
住。
mean these sectors aren't incredibly important. The housing economy matters to the economy, the overall economy, and so does the ag economy. It's the breadth and diversity of the U.S. economy that gives it its strength. It's the dynamism of what's happening in each of these sectors, including in agriculture, that gives us great comfort that economic growth can be materially higher than it is. We are not afraid of productivity-led growth, and that's not unique to AI. That's across all sectors of the economy. As I mentioned to Chairman Hill, we're looking for growth to be broader and the change in prices, the inflation in prices to be more limited. Agriculture is not immune to either of those developments.
Well, the Agriculture Secretary has been added to some of your important committees to make sure there's discussion. I hope that you will listen to her. It is important for you to understand that when people talk about the stock market or investment, farmers and ranchers look out in their backyard at the cost of their equipment, at the cost of their land, at the cost of things. They don't have a stock market. They have their own investment. And I think that the Secretary can be there to completely continue to remind you of that. Labor market outlook really looks good. Page 16, sir, your take.
Yeah, so the labor market has been remarkably resilient. The increase in nominal wages has been solid. You might have heard in my comments at the beginning of this a bit more focus on the price stability part of the mandate. I want you to know, though, that there is no disfavored part of the legislative remit that you gave us. The dual mandate is your word to us that we're going to focus on price stability and on full employment. I intend to do just that, and if I could add one other thing, in my view, the two parts of the mandate are not in conflict. This is not an either-or proposition. The more we can do to deliver low and stable prices, the more we can get it such that people aren't worried about inflation. More employers are going to want to hire more workers. So you gave us a
我是
remit.
重申呢，
We
双
take
方这
both
是没有
parts
互
of
相
it
拉扯的，劳动
seriously.
市场和物价稳定。
As we look out the window now, the labor markets look to be in pretty good balance. We've got some work to do on the inflation front.
劳动市场
Well,
呢
we
是
in
在
the
有
one
这
big
个平
beautiful
衡的现
bill
象的。
encourage people to
现
go
在
back
的
to work.
主要的工作呢是在
That is
通
why
胀这一
we
方
do
面。
not tax overtime pay and why we do not
所
tax
以这里是把
what
通
would
胀给
be
控制住
tips.
呢，可
We
以解决
need
不
to
少问
get
题。
people back in the
美联储这一份的
marketplace.
观
We
点。
hope you helped us out, Mr. Chairman. Welcome to us, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your time.
Gentleman from Texas yields back. Chair recognizes the ranking member of our Capital Markets Subcommittee, Mr. Sherman of California, for 5 minutes.
同时，物价稳定可以
Chairman,
去
first
确
I
保
want to
长
commend
线
you for
的
looking to improve the
美债收
data
率呢是
on
利率
which
可以去稳
you
定。
base your monetary policy decisions. Up until now, we've relied on survey data as a substantial part of that, and increasingly Americans just don't voluntarily answer survey questions. I want to commend you for declaring your independence. We saw what happened in Argentina, Venezuela, and most notably Turkey, when federal central bank independence is eroded. I would say, ironically, that had your predecessor caved to Trump and lowered interest rates below what economics would call for, we would have much higher inflation today, and that would have been bad for Americans. It would have been absolutely terrible for the Republican Party. So the independent, your agency has saved Donald Trump from himself. And finally, I would say don't rely on this distinction between the Cook and the Slaughter cases. The idea that every congressionally created independent agency isn't independent except yours, you don't want to be relying on that. The distinctions the court makes between your agency and every other agency are rather weak historically. Our capital markets support our business expansion and our economy. Money market funds are an important part of that, buying short-term commercial paper from corporations. Our payment system is designed to meet the needs of honest Americans. That's why we have an anti-money laundering, know your customer rule that makes it a bad system for drug dealers, sanctions evaders, etc. There's a rival to these institutions, and that is a cryptocurrency, which literally means hidden money, and is designed to, and then we have in particularly stable coins, which are just like a money market fund, except you earn zero interest, and everything is hidden. Now, the Federal Reserve established liquidity facilities to support money market funds in the last crisis. Will the Federal Reserve support cryptocurrency or stable coins if they face a run-on from investors?
So, Congressman, thank you for mentioning many of those issues. We talked about a lot of them in your office, so I appreciate it. I still have the scars from the 2008 financial crisis.
We all
still have
do.
the scars from the extraordinary efforts that my colleagues and I, under Chairman Bernanke's leadership, had to do. That is not something we want to repeat.
Can you
The
assure
reforms
us
that we need are
that
to
you
try
will
to
not
mitigate that.
be bailing out stablecoin and cryptocurrency?
So I don't want to, I can be more broadly than that. We do not want to be in the bailout business, full stop.
But your predecessor did provide a liquidity function for money market funds. If, God forbid, we faced a similar circumstance in the crypto world, would you bail them out?
So I want to be very clear. We're going to do everything we can to mitigate those sorts of extraordinary risks. If and when they were to come in the next 4 years, we want to be in a position we're not bailing out anybody, including crypto.
You're not really answering the question. Obviously, everybody prefers our
刚刚
economy
沃尔
works
给了非
well.
常强硬的姿态，就在讨论货币市场基金呢，之前在
Certainly
这类问题里
concerned
边呢
with，giving
美联储是有
non-banks
去
direct
提供流动性
access
去
to the
帮助
payment
的。
system,
那
and
加密
this
币稳定
Kraken
币这一边会不会得到一
filing
样
with
的
the
帮助？
Kansas City Fed is concerning, but I want to
刚
move
沃尔
on to
是
Basel
试图
III.
去说，就是我们想尽
Your
量去降
predecessor
低风
said
险，
that
然后后面是
the
摆到
capital
不会去帮
requirements
助
for banks in 2019 were about right.
任何的
The current reproposal
一方。
substantially raises those capital requirements. Were capital requirements about right in 2019, or should they be higher than that today?
So the good news is we have a proposed capital rule that's out for comment. I'm quite interested in getting
刚沃尔指向的是我们
reports
想
and the
试图
comments
在这
on
一
that.
个救助的
And
业
I
务里
look
面
forward
让你
to
不要
reviewing those and making a judgment. I would say, as a first principle, strong capital ratios, strong liquidity ratios, strong supervision, and strong market discipline, they're all of a piece to ensure we don't find ourselves in a world where there's unsafe or unsound institutions.
We, of course, want strong limits. On the other hand, if you go overboard, you hurt economic growth and hurt the economy. I hope in that review process you'll look at low-income housing tax credits, where you've already moved from 400% to 100%. It should be closer to 20%. These are very stable assets.
Gentleman's time has
and
expired.
my time has expired.
Appreciate you, Mr. Sherman. The chair
所以前
recognizes
面
the
就是
chair of
说，
our
就是
subcommittee on
尽量不要去
financial
达到那种
institutions,
金融
the
危机的时候，
distinguished
然后又
gentleman
去
from Kentucky.
不要去美联储去
Thank you, Mr.
救
Chairman, and
不同的，包括
Chairman
加
Walsh,
密。
congratulations on your confirmation and swearing in as the 17th Chairman of the Federal Reserve. I am grateful for your commitment to reforming the Fed, and that appreciation is surpassed only by our shared love for Kentucky thoroughbreds and your love of the great sport of horse racing. Let me just ask you, first of all, since you're swearing in over 7 weeks ago, things seem quite a bit different over at the Fed. A few examples: elimination of forward guidance, abstaining from the dot plot, creation of these 5 specialized task forces, and maybe most impressively, taking accountability.
instead of blaming inflation on the pandemic or supply chain interruptions or tariffs or the Strait of Hormuz, you are saying that inflation is always and every time the result of the Fed supporting printing too much money. Tell me, Mr. Warsh, you appear to be quite different from your predecessors. How are you different?
So I've known 5 of my predecessors. I've learned particular lessons from each of them. I can only be my own man. I served before at the Fed for about 5.5 years under Chairman Bernanke, and I learned a lot of things then. But you're right. In 6 weeks, we have caused, I think, a sea change in new thinking, the beginning of a set of reforms that are going to be put in place across at least 5 dimensions in monetary policy. And it's a broader discussion about reforms that will be forthcoming in everything we do, including supervision and regulation, where there's already been a good start, in payments and the rest. We made a lot of progress in 6 weeks, but I think it's important to use this opportunity wisely. The 63 months of inflation above target has been an unfair burden and has been a tax on the American people and businesses. We plan on getting rid of that tax. If that means we need a regime change in policy and we need new consideration of practices, some of which have been working, some of which haven't, that's what we aim to do, and we're just getting started.
Well, I appreciate your commitment to being different. Let's talk about overhauling Fed communications. This from a Wall Street Journal editorial on June 15th. They write, few innovations since 2008 have been as counterproductive as the adoption of forward guidance as a policy tool. The constant yammering, long policy statements, press conferences after every FOMC meeting, nonstop speeches by Fed officials, and above all, the quarterly summary of economic projections has exposed how little the Fed understands about the economy and trapped officials in errant policies. Chairman Warsh, why is it important to do away with the dot plot and end once and for all forward guidance?
Well, Congressman, I've made no secret probably over the last 15 years of my views on communications. I think when central bankers speak like I am before you, it's either one under obligation or in this case under obligation and purpose, which is to share a set of new reforms so that American households and businesses might say to themselves, this is a regime change in policy. We're only beginning it. I'm keenly interested in the views of these 5 task forces, and ultimately these are decisions that are going to be made jointly. The best of the Fed's traditions are to work collegially, and I've really been quite impressed how open-minded my colleagues have been to take it up, specifically in communications. If we were to share with you our every passing thought, I worry not that there's anything wrong with us, but we're human. And if we were to give you my projection today about what we'll do when we meet in 2 weeks, what we'll do over the course of the year, that
呀，哎呀，这块不好看，失败。
全新御茶园，柔香更回甘。御茶园四季春。
Absolutely, absolutely. So all of our degree programs at ASU, especially are the absolutely, absolutely. So all important skills we say at ASU is not only the disciplinary skills, the discipline.
I tried everything, coffee, Pomodoro, and binaural beats, but nothing stuck.
安巴告诉他，你要一生追随我。小贾尼同意了，但同时也问出了一个天真的问题：如果我一生追随你，那我吃饭怎么办？女神听完，就在他上颚点了一下，然后说：从现在开始，你的生命将不再依赖物质。贾尼声称，自从那次点化之后呢，他的饥饿感彻底消失了。然后为了信守承诺追随女神，他也就从11岁那年起跑进了深山，独自修行70年。石涛听完想递个竹篮过去啊，但贾尼也不反驳，而是拿出了一部印度国防部的实验记录。原来早在2010年，印度国防部下属的生理研究所也曾决定动用国家力量来揭穿这个骗局。而当时他们想，如果这不是骗局了，很显然搞懂了贾尼70年荒野生存的原理，那印度军队岂不是就可以培养出一群不需要单兵口粮的超级战士？为此，印度国防部安排了35位顶尖专家，包括分子生物学、内分泌学、神经科学等等等等。贾尼被关在一个全透明的房间里，连洗澡水、漱口水都要经过精确称重，以防他偷喝一滴。然后实验进行到第5天的时候呢，一件让现场所有专家诧异的事情发生了。当时超声波监测显示，贾尼的膀胱里产生了尿液，这是身体正常代谢的结果。按常理，如果不排出，最终会导致剧痛和尿毒症。于是专家们都等着贾尼尿认输，但就在 B 超实时监测的画面之下，那团尿液在累积到200毫升的时候呢，竟然在众目睽睽中被膀胱壁重新吸收回了循环系统。负责扫描的放射科医生贝塔说， 这根本解释不通。在医学教科书里，膀胱是用来存储和排泄的，它不是一个吸收器官呐。更离谱的是，贾尼的血液指标始终维持在完美的范围，没有任何尿毒症的迹象。这意味着什么？难道它真的变成了一个生化闭环，一个不需要掠夺外界，也不产生废物的生化永动机？不可能啊！宇宙法则熵增定理就规定了永动机不存在。但贾尼究竟是如何做到的呢？作弊肯定是作弊，因为在施导的调查中，除了这些神奇以外，还有很多妥妥的骗子。美国时光研究所的创始人威利·布鲁克斯在1980年代是这个领域的明星。他曾经在电视节目中展现了自己的神力，轻而易举地举起了数百磅的杠铃，还声称这全都是光给他的力量。然而，就在1983年，一名狂热的追随者在深夜撞见了他，发现他竟然偷偷溜进了一家麦当劳，几分钟后从里面走出来，手里拽着一只巨无霸汉堡、一份大薯条和一瓶健怡可乐。这场人赃并获突如其来啊！但利维当时的临场反应也堪称逻辑鬼才。他解释说自己确实可以只靠光生活，但是由于地球目前的文明水平太低，如果他完全不吃东西，他的身体频率会变得太高，直接飞升。所以为了继续留在地球拯救人类，他必须吃麦当劳。他甚至宣称健怡可乐里含有能帮他在这个毒性频率很大的环境中中和毒性的有益分子。除了利维呢，还有时光运动的鼻祖杰斯·穆因。1999年，澳洲最硬核的调查节目60分钟向他发出了挑战。杰斯·穆因也是为了证明，就同意在严密的医学监控下进行为期1周的隔离实验。至于隔离地点嘛，他选了一间豪华酒店的套房。第一天他侃侃而谈，可到了第2天就有点不对劲儿了。仅仅到了第3天，医生就警告他，你的脉搏比实验开始前已经翻了1倍，而且你已经开始出现脱水的症状了，还要继续吗？没想到杰斯·穆因说，大意了呀，这酒店负能量太重了，我要求搬到野外的山岭上继续实验。好吧，满足你。可刚到山岭上的第2天呢，他就彻底坚持不住了。医生要强行终止实验，而他却还在找借口说，之所以失败，是因为山上这座隔离房也离马路太近了。由于空气中充满了灰尘和尾气，那是致命的污浊能量，它们挡住了我吸收光的通道。所以这些荒诞的失败，其实在警告我们，对于人类来说，你不是植物，你时光向阳，不是进化，而是自毁。但是施导在调查这些骗子时，却觉得和前面那几位成功的案例完全是不同的气场和氛围啊。他还想更进一步了解，如果沃纳博士推测的系统 B 真实存在，那它究竟存在于哪里呢？
看不下去。什么啊？靠背，想看这个。看看这个。
各位粉丝朋友，大家好，我是凤哥，现在是北京时间速上行放量，以高位的空，然后做了一笔低位的多。那其实昨天晚间的行情呢是受到 CPI 数据的影响哈。那其实我们从价格行为上来讲的话，昨天也是一个低多的这样的一个思路。首先是在上一星期周末的时候，行情在高位上盘整，没有形成上方水平压力位的突破，所以我们在周一给到的观点是，高位这个位置上可以考虑先看一笔回落。那么先做一笔回落的空头，那么这一笔回落的空头的话，其实是以做短多处理，并不考虑去做波段跟长线。 那么原因是什么呢？就是考虑还是价格盘整在上方的这样的一个箱体的位置。那么价格在箱体的顶部，我们给到高位的空头的思路，然后价格回落至箱体的底部。昨天我们给到的建议是考虑低位去接多，然后防守点就落在前方这个地点61500这个位置。好，然后最终价格是走了这一段的反弹啊，昨天没有去做空肯定是对的，然后昨天走了这一波反弹。那么昨天我们给到的这个短多的这个目标是看箱体的顶部是在64000到64500，然后昨天最高价是在65000上方啊，其实已经是上破了这个箱体的。那么接下来应该怎么去做？我们首先是先看日线级别的图表。其实我个人认为日线上的话，它其实是一个有一点类似于是一个头肩底部的这样的一个形态，是一个潜在的头肩底部。先是形成6万的跌破，好，然后这里一个新低，然后这里的话，我们看到64500这个位置多次尝试未能突破，然后走了这一段的下行回落，好，然后这个位置再往上拉高，所以这个位置我认为有一点就像一个潜在的就走一个宽幅的方力心算，所以方案，所以让目前价格再次回啊，如果说尝试高位的这里调整，可能这里调。然后再考虑低位接多，回落过后没有形成。
没掉。 Speculation. Speculation. 我操！ 始终相信，只要追赶，我始终相信。哈哈，我的。一只一双人，红尘拿着伞无痕追。终究不死，强者恒强。 哎，我操！真这么有钱啊！哦，真，我操！哦，我操！我操！这些主播都比我有钱。 去年5天。看一下。我操！ 干你娘嘞！你有录到？